I have been reading peak fiction, or at least some titles that are quite well regarded. Hello and welcome to That Light Novel Guy, and today I'm going to go through some light novels that, well, are very, very good, at least in my opinion. Yes, I've used the words peak fiction, but let's face it, anybody could call anything peak fiction. Peak fiction. But I genuinely do believe that these titles are pretty darn good. Let's talk about them, shall we? The first peak fiction we're going to talk about is Wandering Witch, The Journey of Elena. And honestly, this is a really good title that I honestly kind of forget about sometimes. It's one of those ones I always genuinely like whenever I read a new volume, but I often just kind of forget that it exists. It wasn't until I recently covered it in my summer reads for 2023 that I kind of was like, oh yeah, you know what, this is a really good series that I don't think gets enough love. Granted, it's not quite Kino's Journey, a title that I constantly want, but it's never going to come, so we're making do with this. What is this title about? Well, this is about a young girl, a witch called Elena, and she travels from country to country. Now, Elena isn't the perfect protagonist. She's quite self-centered. She's quite spoiled. She'll do anything for money, and yeah, she's definitely a flawed protagonist, which is perfectly fine. She ends up in a lot of situations, usually with a girl, another girl, the girl of the chapter, who is in trouble, and she ends up helping them out, either willingly or more than likely unwillingly, is literally tricked or is bribed into helping. And you know what, this is a fun one. Now we're 11 volumes in and it still remains quite fresh. Now the first few volumes I felt had a lot more darker tone. There was some particular chapters where I was just like, oh, you know what, that's not something I would normally see. As it went on, I feel like it kind of got used to what it's doing. A lot of characters started recurring, and that's perfectly fine. I'm perfectly fine with characters recurring, and it makes the world feel that little bit more alive. There's only so many countries you can go to, as of course. But it's a fun one if you want very easy to read chapters that are standalone, that you can kind of read in a half hour or whatever and still have a pretty good time. And if you don't have a good time with a particular chapter, the next one might just be right up your alley. This one is always one that I do recommend people try and check out. It is a very fun title. It's not serious, the artwork is pretty darn nice, and you know what, it's always a fun read. The next title is one that I feel like I've talked about a lot, but I don't hear anybody read, and it's a huge shame because this one is extremely good, to the point that it probably went straight into my top 5, even though I only started it late last year, and that is Arena, the Vampire Cosmonaut. Now I'm going to talk about this one. I always say after I finish this one, I'm going to give this a full-on review. I never do. So I'm going to talk about it as many times as I can until I do that review. But Arena, the Vampire Cosmonaut, if you want an alternative telling to real-world events, this one is for you. It's not an isekai, it's not a fantasy. Well, I mean, there's a vampire in it, but yeah. So this is the Space Race. It is an alternative telling, focusing a little bit more on the Russian side of things rather than the American side of things, and the things that go on behind closed doors. So Arena is a young vampire girl who is literally being used as a guinea pig due to a technicality that they do not want to send humans into space until they are ready. But vampires don't count as humans, do they? So it's perfectly fine. Is it? Of course, we have Lev Leps, another character who is essentially Arena's handler. He is the one who is training her, and they form an intimate bond. A bond that is going to go beyond human and vampires and reach the one place that everybody dreams of, the stars. This is an absolutely fantastic title, and personally, it is easily one of my favourites. It is such a great title that do not sleep on this one. Really do not. If you just want your light novels to be fantasy or whatever, by all means. But if you want something a little bit different, and I don't think I've seen anything quite like this in a light novel, this one has to be on your list. Now, it does jump between countries. The first few volumes is about Russia, then it jumps into American, and then it kind of jumps beyond Russian and American. There is a lot of dark things going on. Of course, there's secret kind of things, there's spy things, there's a lot of darkness of what countries and things are willing to do in order to win the space race. It has diverted from real life. It does follow a lot of real life kind of things, but then it, obviously at one point it just goes, diverts and does its own little thing. I'm pretty sure in real life they didn't have vampires as well. Can't confirm that, I wasn't there. But yeah, it's a really good title. I would really recommend it if you like something a little bit different. This one has to be on your list. Next up is another one that has went more or less straight into my top 10, and this one is one that a lot of people really hyped up. They really hyped this one up, and well worth it. Jikiharu is a sex worker in another world, and more or less straightly I'm probably getting demonetized for this particular video. Now this one is interesting. So this is about a girl who is sent to another world along with one of her classmates, and the classmate gets all of the special abilities, all of the overpowered stuff and whatever. She gets, well, nothing, pretty much nothing, and has to make a living as a sex worker in another world. Now this one is very unfiltered. It's very much the point of view of this sex worker in another world. Hates a job, but is trying to find the good things that come with it, and it's really revitalizing. It's really refreshing to read such a series that is very serious about what it talks about, but it also does a lot of things right, and I mean a lot of things right. This is a very good isekai title. It's not good. She's not going to go out hunting stuff or what have you. No, it's literally her living a very normal kind of life in a very fantasy world. Very bitter about obviously things that's gone on. Really been given a raw bad deal about stuff, but is trying to make best of things. Of course, a lot of the sex is unfiltered, so it's not like Survival of Another World with My Mistress, where it's just like, we went to the room and, oh, you can guess what's going on here. It definitely reads very, very sexual and what have you, because, yeah, that's kind of what you would expect. It's a very good read, and it's one that, once I got into it, I couldn't put it down. Really do recommend this one. A very, very good one that I feel like a lot of people who are really into light novels do read this one, but I don't really feel like many people who are just getting into light novels would read it. I think that the whole plot kind of, I think people think it's going to be too ecchi, where it's kind of ecchi, it's very kind of light-hearted, it's stupid, you don't take it serious. This one is very much more serious, but it's got a lot of fun in there as well. A very, very great series that has easily went into my top 10. Do check it out if you haven't already. There is a sequel, Jikiharu Summer Edition, which I think is quite hard to find at the moment. So yeah, if you can find either of these volumes for RRP, check it out. You won't be disappointed if you want something a little bit more interesting in an isekai. Now the next one is ones that I have read volume 15 and 16 of, and that is one that I always see is in my favourites, or my top 2 favourites. Might not be in my might not be my favourites now. There's a few other titles very contending for number 1 now, and that is Overlord. So I read volume 15 and volume 16 of The Half-Elf Demigod. Now it's interesting because volume 15, this is all one story by the way, so volume 15 was slow. It was very slow in getting things going. Volume 16 has a lot more action. And it kind of feels like the action is very rushed through. So even though there's 2 volumes to this arc, it still feels like it goes very, very fast. Especially compared to volumes 12 and 13, which felt I had so much content in there. when I look at that's getting a movie, and I'm just like, they're not going to fit all of that in. They're going to rush it. It's a really good arc. Whereas this one wasn't quite as good. I still love the series, but this one wasn't nearly as good as some of the earlier stuff. But when it was good, it was very, very good. You guys know what Overlord is. If you like light novels, you probably have heard this one many, many times beforehand. And yeah, it's about a guy who gets stuck in a MMO that is closing down, and essentially he becomes the final boss. All of his underlings become all of his underling NPCs become real people, and everything in this world is literally developed, set up just to be crushed by our main protagonist and his underlings, and it really works. This one, volume 15, 16, no different. Everything is built up. We get a lot of stuff about the elves and stuff like that, but it is built up just to be crushed. The only thing is, I kind of felt like I said, volume 15 was all about kind of becoming friends with the elves and what have you, going on this holiday to the elven village. And then the first half of volume 16 is also like that. But even when it kind of resolved everything, I still didn't really have much attachment to the elves, as opposed to, say, the lizard men, where we got a lot of stuff with it. I think the problem is that pretty much all of this does focus on Ainz. And I love Ainz, I love the main character, and I love his underlings, but I feel like volumes where it just focuses on him rather than a third party, looking at that with Ainz kind of also being like a side character, you don't get the same amount of development. I didn't really have any attachment to any of the side characters in this particular 2 volumes, and some of the stuff kind of felt a little bit padded on, but it also felt like it was rushed through. It's very interesting, I love the series, but these 2 volumes did knock it down a little bit, just for me. But I would still recommend checking this one out. It is very well regarded, and for all of the right reasons. Next up, we have the title that, well, I feel like everybody considers to be the peak of the peak fiction when it comes to light novels, and that is Mushoko Tensei. Hang on, that's not Mushoko Tensei. That's Ascendance of a Bookworm. Yeah, I'm going to be honest. I've read 1 volume of Mushoko Tensei, never got any further. Ascendance of a Bookworm, however, is honestly the best thought out light novel that I have read, and that is saying a lot. I've probably read over 100 light novels at this point. Ascendance of a Bookworm, very, very rapidly, once I got into the whole series, became one that I loved more and more. And yeah, I just can't wait to read the next volume, which I think actually might be out. It's weird, with living in the UK, stuff gets released and then it's just like, it's like a month afterwards. So I think the next volume of this might be out in America, but in the UK, still gotta wait a little bit. Or it might be out and I just haven't bought it yet because... So, Ascendance of a Bookworm is about a young girl called Mine, who loves books, adores books, reads books non-stop, and is crushed by books, and is reborn as a very sickly child in another world. Now, that is the basic thing. She wants to get books, and will stop at nothing to get books. She starts inventing things with the local children, and things just escalate from there. The world building on this is top notch. You don't see anything from later volumes early on, but the seeds are sown. It might be in a little bit of a conversation, but at the end of the day, the poor people, they don't really know anything about, you know, the church. The church have limited roles with the nobility, and then magic school or what have you, and it's so well done in that you kind of get enough for what you need to know. While it's kind of like, oh well, we haven't seen this character in so long, what are they doing? They'll pop up like a few volumes later and be like, oh yeah, well all this has happened and all this has happened. It feels like the world is very organic. It feels like there is a big world out there. Of course, we are only getting to see what the main character knows and actually experiences, And it's a really good one for doing that. It is a very good series and only gets better and better with each volume. People keep saying at one point, I think in these next few volumes, it get to a point where I will just stop buying the physical ones and just have to catch up digitally because I will need to know what's going on. I think we're nearly at the end of part 4 in terms of physical volumes. Part 5 is the last one, and honestly, I cannot wait. This series is such a great one, and honestly, if you like light novels, it has to be on your list of things to check out. It is easily the best light novel I have read, and I have read a lot of light novels. But let me know in the comments what you guys have been reading and what you guys consider to be peak fiction. Is it Mushoko Tensei? Is it something else entirely? Let me know, and maybe someday I'll check them out. See you in the next page. Goodbye.